googly, the top spinner and his flipper. Now, before he had a shoulder operation, after quite a number of years, his flipper was unbelievable. Because if you played back and didn't spot it, you were out. Bowled or LBW. He was magic. And I can only pay him the highest compliment by saying he was in Bradman, Sobers, then him, for me, the three greatest cricketers. Look, there have been many, many fast bowlers, many, many great batsmen, but he changed the game with wrist spin. He had a fierce determination to win. He had great skill, great personality with it. And my best compliment I could pay him was say, and I've met him a number of times, I never faced him, is to say, I wish I'd have been able to bat against you. He said, really, Jeffrey? I said, yeah, not because I think I would have played easily, because I've played some great fast bowlers in Holding, Roberts, Garner, Croft, Marshall, but I never faced anybody as great as you. And it had been the supreme challenge.
A huge
challenge, like climbing Mount Everest to face him.
A huge loss for Australian cricket, and a huge loss to cricket, and on the same day as Rod Marsh also dying from a heart attack. So, Jeffrey, thank you very much for talking to us on GB News. NATO entering the fighting in Ukraine could lead to widespread war in Europe. That's according to Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. The UN Human Rights Office says 331 civilians have been killed and 675 injured in the Ukraine conflict so far. That as Boris Johnson calls Moscow's shelling of a nuclear power station in Ukraine a direct threat to the safety of all of Europe. The Zaporizhzhia power plant, the largest in Europe, caught fire overnight and has been seized by Russian forces. Speaking in Brussels earlier, Stoltenberg said NATO isn't seeking a war with Russia.
With the cities under siege, schools, hospitals and residential buildings shelled, reckless actions around a nuclear power plant last night, and many civilians killed or wounded. The days to come are likely to be worse.
Jens Stoltenberg there. Liz Truss is attending a series of meetings with G7 leaders and EU ministers at NATO's headquarters in Brussels. Outside, protesters have gathered calling for a no-fly zone over Ukraine to be enforced, carrying placards reading "NATO close the sky" and "NATO act now." The mostly Ukrainian demonstrators said their country's military could not fend off the Russian invasion without more help from the West. Some NATO members have indicated a willingness to discuss it, but many reject any military action that would put them in direct conflict with nuclear-armed Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the Russian people to take action against their government.
Russian people, I want to appeal to you. How is this possible? After all, we fought together in 1986 against the consequences of the Chernobyl catastrophe. How could you ever forget about it? If you did not forget, then you must not keep silent. You must tell your authorities. Go out on the streets and say that you want to live on the land without radioactive contamination. Radiation does not know where Russia is.
In other news, Paulette Hamilton has won the Birmingham Erdington by-election, holding the Labour seat. A nurse of 25 years, Miss Hamilton becomes the first black MP to represent a Birmingham constituency. In her victory speech, she expressed her admiration for the work done by her predecessor, Jack Dromey, who died in January. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
So it's just coming up to 8 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we we get stuck into the debate. Here's what else is coming up today. My focus this Friday at 5 o'clock. What role does China have when it comes to the invasion of Ukraine? So far, China has called on both Russia and Ukraine to find a solution through negotiations, but has stopped short of condemning Russia's actions. So could they hold the key to peace talks between the two countries? The Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? The Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has announced the opening of a £253 million prison with a strong focus on rehabilitation for inmates to lead productive lives when they are released. The facility will not have bars on its windows and the cells will be called rooms. So I'm asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? And I'll meet a woman who's campaigning for stronger regulation in the beauty industry. Rachel Napier had a bad reaction to lip filler as it was administered incorrectly. And if you are watching on TV, you'll be able to see it. If you go online, you can check us out and have a look on the app. You'll see exactly what happened to her. The person who did it was an unlicensed practitioner. And next week, the government will table an amendment to the Health and Care Bill to crack down on unlicensed treatments. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or send me that tweet at gbnews. But let's start this hour with the news that you've just been hearing. The legendary Australian leg spinner Shane Warne has died of a suspected heart attack at the age of just 52. His management said that Warne has been found unresponsive in his villa in Thailand. The spinner, who is arguably one of the greatest cricketers of all time, took 708 test wickets in 145 matches across a stellar 15-year career. And one of his best-known achievements was the ball of the century, the name given to one of his deliveries to English batsman Mike Gatting. With his first ball against England, Shane Warne, in his first Ashes test, bowled Gatting out, and it became recognised as being a huge significant victory, and in not just one context of the match or the series, but in cricket in general. And in that, it signalled the revival of leg spin bowling. So let's reflect on his life, not only on the field, but as a man with someone who knew him well and had worked with him. Mark Nicholas is a broadcaster and former English cricketer. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Mark, away from his heroics on the field, tell us a bit about the man.
Kind, fun, generous, effervescent, enthusiastic, phenomenal, powerful, one of the greatest cricketers of all time. There's no question about that. Voted the top 5 by Wisden for the last century. What can I tell you? This was a unique person. I know we're all unique, but he took things to a completely different level. His skill as a bowler, you just heard about on the previous show with Jeffrey Boycott, but I mean, his skill as a bowler, yes, but his skill as a showman, his ability to entertain. He was cock of the walk, all right, but he was also entitled to be so, because few people have lit up the stage in cricket like he has, if any. Maybe he's amongst modern players the most natural entertainer that we've seen, and to be one of the greatest cricketers as well, alongside, not to compromise your skill, the way you chose to it is a cool thing. I think he's a bit of a freak of a guy, a dear friend. I wrote his book, his autobiography. I've got 35 hours of tape. Stuff that didn't make the book is pretty darn good too. It's a good thing it didn't. A terrible loss. I don't know what to say. I sort of can't believe it, really. An amazing human being and a very trusted friend, actually. An easy man to trust.
Yeah, and what a fantastic cricketer. So many amazing things that he achieved. And one of those, of course, was the ball of the century that he delivered in 1993 at the Ashes tour. Can you tell me a little bit about the memories of that day?
Well, it was his first ball. That was the point. Mm-hmm. And so he came on at Old Trafford. You know, in England, we hadn't seen him. I mean, I don't think that's to say we didn't know about him, but I don't think anybody knew, you know, he was as good as he was going to be. And he bowled this ball to Mike Gatting that drifted in the air about 2 feet to pitch just outside Mike Gatting's leg stump and spin so far it hit the top of Gatting's off stump. And it just blew everybody away. Richie Benner was on commentary with Tony Lewis and just simply said he's done it, and didn't know what else to say, really. We all just watched it in awe of the amount of movement of the ball, one way and the other, the accuracy, and then, of course, the celebration. You know, Warne's celebrations were always enjoyable. You knew he was in the hunt, that is for sure, and you knew you were the hunted most of the time as well. It was a ball that stunned the world and is often called the greatest ball ever. It was certainly called the ball of the last century, and it might be the ball of all time.
Listen, it's really good to hear your memories, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. That's Mark Nicholas. He's a broadcaster and former English cricketer, or talking about Shane Warne, who died today, just age 52. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So if you just joined me, where have you been? It's just fast approaching 14 minutes after 4 o'clock. Now, it's all very well offering platitudes to the people of Ukraine and speaking of the bravery of President Zelensky, relatively unknown across the world until about a week or so ago. But how about we offer him real help? And by doing that, we actually help ourselves. Now, I've been thinking long and hard about this, and I believe that this war is actually all about money. Putin has loads, and we're supplying it. We're funding this war and making him more powerful in the process. The only way we can stop him is if the world stops buying Russian gas, and we could do it pretty much tomorrow. Europe would need to buy from, say, Qatar, who haven't necessarily got the best human rights record, but who are we to judge? We're funding a maniac who's bludgeoning his own people as we idly watch. He's looking for provocation as he wavers the threat of nuclear war, which even he knows that nobody wins. But what does billionaire Putin care? He's had a pretty good life. He's almost 70, so closer to the end than the beginning of it. And he must know that he's already lost this battle. You can take over land, but winning hearts and minds, especially in this technological era after what he's done, will be nigh on impossible. And then getting the world to welcome Russia back into the fold is simply not going to happen with him at the helm. He's got nothing left to lose, and that makes him incredibly dangerous. I once went out with somebody who would try and provoke me into anger so that he could blame me for the argument that ensued. Whatever he did from there on in was always my fault. Narcissistic behaviour that, unless you stop feeding, will simply get worse. So why doesn't Europe cut off its reliance on Russian gas? Answer: because it would send the price sky high. It would cost too much. You think? Really? Well, let's talk cost. If we carry on down this path, there's the cost of those lost in battle, thousands of young people, many blindly led to their deaths to fight for no real reason. There's the civilian casualties as people are ruthlessly murdered, caught in the crossfire. Not everyone is able-bodied or young and healthy enough to flee, and some simply don't want to. And for those that do, a humanitarian crisis as millions of people escape both Ukraine and Russia. How do you think these people will be funded? Well, through our taxes, of course. And then after all the bloodshed and the money spent, it's still not over. The threat of a nuclear war with Russia will hover over the world. Put it this way, rather than paying towards a net zero nonsense agenda, I would be prepared to pay 3 times what I'm paying in fuel on every front if it stops that man from genocide. And what's more, if you think that that is too much, what's coming down the line will be way more costly. If it means that we stop Putin in his tracks, we must stop funding this war, because we're next. Right, so let's get started. I want to welcome again to my panel former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and also former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. So welcome both. Thank you very much for joining me. It's really good to see you. Now, I want to talk to you about this, Lembit, because you have links. You have links around the area of Ukraine. Yeah. What are your thoughts as you're watching on? Because we talked about this last time, but things have sort of ratcheted up a notch.
OK, let's spare the diplomacy here. Hard facts. Number one, a proportion of my family was killed by the Soviet Union, so I've got no reason to love Russia. Secondly, Putin does have some strategic points which aren't really being reported in the media about why Ukraine's so important to Russia. And there's clearly a Western bias in a lot of the reporting. Thirdly, Putin may have made a tactical mistake in what he's doing, but we don't know that yet. Fundamentally, we have to recognise Putin is not mad. He's made a judgment. It might be a bad judgment, but he's made a judgment. And the West has to be quite careful about what it's saying here, because we've started lots of unprovoked wars ourselves. What should we do? Well, it's got to be diplomacy. And there's something that you've said which is really interesting to me. This net zero thing makes us so dependent on Russia, because we pretend, number one, that CO2 is a problem. That's a whole different subject. But number two, that it's more important for us to be dependent on Russia than to frack gas from the ground, use oil and use coal.
Well, but to be fair to us, it's only about 5% I think that we use from Russia, although we think it's 5% roughly, because we don't really
But there's a gearing here.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend. If we are determined to try to be net zero, and anybody who watches regularly knows I think that's a rubbish concept, then we are beholden to Russia. Whether we like it or not, we have massive dependence on Russia. So we want to have a war with Russia, or we're willing to have a war with Russia, either through economic sanctions or some other way. And at the same time, we think that we can pursue our environmental agenda. It doesn't work. And I didn't come here today to talk about my concerns about that environmental fanaticism. But that fanaticism is now playing into what could become a world war.
Well, of course, you've got Germany as well, who rely on Russian gas. It's about 40%.
And that's why they've been quite quiet about it.
Well, they've stopped Nord Stream 2, but what we haven't talked about is Nord Stream 1 that runs through Ukraine, which could be why tactically he's going for that. And also they have a pipeline through Belarus as well. Claire?
I think one of the things that you mentioned just then was that Putin has nothing to lose. And I think that is exactly right. He is now locked off from the world. He doesn't care what the rest of us think. He never has done previously. He wants to rebuild the USSR. And I don't think it would stop at Ukraine. And I know you're putting faces at me just now, and I think he does want to build that empire back. And he will look at places like Georgia and Moldova, who are lining up for EU membership. They think that's going to buy them some safety and some security. Well, you know, that remains to be seen. But the problems that he has always had is the fact that Ukrainian people voted to get their independence. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like people to be able to go out there and say, actually, we want to do something different. We will be a neighbour to you. We're not going to cause you any problems. And he doesn't see it and he doesn't like it. I'm making faces at you because I recently was advised to watch a documentary by Oliver Stone, 2016. It was made, Ukraine on Fire. I haven't got time to go into the details of what it says, but it gives you a different perspective, not one which has been reported in the Western media. I don't think that Putin's ambitions are crazy. Maybe we can argue about his tactics, but there is so much provocation from the West using the Ukraine, using Crimea perhaps as a proxy war to try to degrade Russia. But it's not the West that's gone in there and started
yes, it is.
a war. No,
yes, it is.
In what way? In what way are you saying that the West has gone in to start the war? Very briefly.
If you look at the history, in 30 seconds, look at the history of the Ukraine war, sorry, the Crimean War, which isn't in the news because it's boring, because it's been going on. We've been supplying that. Secondly, we promised not to get Ukraine into NATO. Now we've been trying to do that. Essentially...
Well, they want to get into NATO. Yeah. We're not trying to.
Yes, OK, but we made a deal with Russia and we're breaking the deal. NATO's breaking the deal. So if you start breaking deals, then all bets are off.
Well, that doesn't mean that you should bludgeon your own people.
I agree with you.
So I hear what you're saying.
I agree, but it's not a one-sided argument.
Well, no, but it's interesting that you say that it isn't one-sided, but because I'm just looking at the humanitarian cost and thinking that actually that is one-sided and it's unnecessary. It doesn't need to be done that way.
If I can make one more small point. I was in Bulgaria last week. And it seemed to me that they had a different view to what we're discussing here.
What was their view?
Their view was this was bound to happen because of the way that the West was treating Russia.
But also Bulgaria is very reliant upon Russian money, so I don't think you can take that as a straight argument.
They see themselves as Europe.
So these are different views of something from different perspectives, which we have to acknowledge because they could be fueling the narrative. And that then makes us in Europe look quite bad, actually, in terms of those in Russia. And I suspect the Russian people are the key to this war ending. Now, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, it's time for the Great British Debate. In this hour, I'm asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? Inmates at the new HMP 5 Wells prison have access to table tennis and state-of-the-art gyms, and they have no bars on their windows. windows, not actually bars. I think you're thinking I was going to say a pub. They ain't got a pub in there. But there's still time, to be fair, with all this. When the facility is being called soft, so-called residents, not prisoners. I mean, seriously, it's going to focus on rehabilitation, which is important. So is this really justice, or is it simply a soft touch? Send me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet me at GBNews. And currently there's a poll up right now asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? Cast your vote now. We'll be back after this short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. It's 25 after 4 and it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. Now, I'm asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? A new £253 million so-called smart prison in Wellingborough is taking a different approach to criminal justice. It focuses on rehabilitation and maintaining family links for inmates rather than punishment. The Category C prison features in-cell tablets so that prisoners can access education and learning. And there's also a no bars hold. Sorry, no, I couldn't help myself. No, there's also no bars on windows, and the facility will call prisoners residents and the cells rooms. The prison's governor, John McLaughlin, says that it'll help harness good habits and resettle inmates. But I want to ask if they're being too soft on people who've ultimately broken the law. So I'm joined now by somebody who's spent time in prison. His name is Adz Khan, and he's a former prison inmate, and he joins me now from Doncaster. Adz, thank you so much for joining me. Now, to anybody listening to this, I'm thinking, what? What's the problem with calling your room a cell? It's a cell. You should be aware that you're incarcerated for doing something that isn't good, and we will rehabilitate you, but let's not soft-coat it and sugar-coat it. But what's your view?
I mean, my view is quite simple, really. Whether it's they call it a cell or they call it a room, the fact of the matter remains is that you are actually still in custody and you still have your liberties taken away from you. It's still a punishment. And, you're still away from family ties. So whether you decide to call it a prison cell or a room, it goes to the age-old saying of sticks and stones may break my bones. But the fact remains is that it's still a prison.
Well, they said that they would also ensure that you have all your family ties as well. So that's a new approach as well. Do you think that that's a better move rather than actually keeping people away from their families and isolating them?
To be fair, I mean, it's going to be a Category C prison. So in that instance, they've already been segregated from their families for a very long time, because you've got to remember these aren't people that have just committed a crime and gone straight into the prison. They've been to other prisons, and it's going to be, they're getting reintroduced back into society over time. So they've maybe Cat A prisoners that have gone through the system and now a Category B prisoner, and then now they're going to be a Category C prisoner. So they've been through the system, and we know that, look, we hope that the prison system works, and it has worked for me, but you've got to go through the system in order for it to be effective. And at this moment in time, well, that's what they're doing. So I'm all for it, to be fair.
Well, what about you then? So what's your story then? Because you were incarcerated. Can you tell us what it was for and how long you were there for?
Yes, I was found guilty of murder through the controversial law of joint enterprise. And it still saddens me up to this day, the fact that somebody's lost their life. You know, I think about it every single day. And some of the postage notes that you'll probably see behind me is that I actually go around schools and colleges and work with youngsters and, work with youngsters, telling them about my story, highlighting the dangers of prison and crime, and doing my utmost to reduce the risk of offending and re-offending. I mean, inside prison, I walked out with 37 certificates and qualifications and 7 diplomas. And there's some dumbbells behind me as well, but that'll signify the fact that I own my own gym at this moment in time, and I've done this by developing the school, these certificates and qualifications that I've actually gained in prison.
I see. And how long were you in prison for?
I was given a life sentence with a minimum recommendation of 9 years, but I got released out in 7. I was fortunate enough to get my first parole based on what I've actually done in custody and how I've managed to utilise the qualifications that prisons offered, and even though sometimes the qualifications that they didn't offer, to then rehabilitate me and get me back into society. And now I want to spend my time in a constructive manner and teaching the things that I've actually learned in prison and the dangers of crime and prison, and hopefully helping the youth not do that going forward. Because in Doncaster, it was the bloodiest year to date. There was 4 murders, 20 stabbings, and I believe 7 rapes as well. So it's something close to my heart, and I want to do my utmost to give the information to our youngsters that prison is not the way. And there are better. You never underestimate the stupidity of one person in large groups.
No, I wouldn't at all. And so you would say that these things that they're changing, is this irrelevant though? Because you still managed to do well. You set up your own business. You've got everything going on in prison. You got the education that you needed to push forward in your life. So it did actually rehabilitate you. So do you think that these little tweaks here and there, like calling your cell a room and all of that, are actually a waste of time?
I mean, it's not a waste of time. For me, it worked. I mean, I had the go, I had the drive, and we've got to remember some of these prisoners, they come a life where they haven't got any support around them, whether that be from family support or relationship support. They haven't got that, and they've never had that, you see. So, building that confidence up and building that self-esteem up. And it's a good thing with that, the fact that, they've got a gym in there, because any successful person that I've either trained or worked with or spent some time with, from likes of Sir Richard Branson to John Caldwell, one thing all successful people have in common, and that is that they actually work out or they go to a gym. So I think that obviously tells us that there's all the positives of actually going to the gym and gaining experience and building yourself up and building your self-esteem up and your confidence up. And mental health is a huge thing these days. Everybody's got it. It's just some days you've got good mental health and some days you've got bad mental health. And one thing I know is that if I work out in the mornings, then if something happens during the day, I'm able to tackle it in a much more better mental state.
Well, I'm like that. I quite like that myself as well. But and very, very briefly then, is this needed for the prison service then, this whole sort of kind of reform? Yes or no? Do you think it's needed?
It is needed, because you've got to remember that they've actually been in other prisons before that. So then for them to be slowly reintroduced back into society, then, they've done their time. They need to, for them to be slowly reintroduced back into society, they're going through the system, and this is just a part of the system. Now, if you went from being a Category A prisoner to straight release after spending 20 years in prison, you haven't got the tools available, you've not got the skills available, you're going to get out and you're going to go straight to the big wide world.
So you think, so this is a yes or no then? So yes, you'd say yes. I've just got to wrap up because I'm going to...
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. I'm looking forward to being invited there to do a talk to the prisoners about motivation and mindset, for sure.
OK. Well, Adz, thank you so much for joining me. That's Adz Khan. He's a former prison inmate. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying already. Andrew says, could people in prison not be given tasks to contribute to society? I know it might be criticised as demeaning by some, but even small activities such as repairs and street tidying could make a big difference and help rehabilitation. Dave said people should be careful making sweeping statements about the condition of our prisons when they've never been in one and don't know what it's like. Well, I have actually, but I wasn't arrested. I just went in. I was doing some Duke of Edinburgh, so I have actually, just in case you're talking about me. Tom says, this is absurd. There's not enough deterrent. Send them to one of Putin's gulags and see how they like it there. Interesting stuff. Well, if you just tuned in, welcome. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Upik and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. But first, let's get you up to date with the latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4:33. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. NATO entering or fighting in Ukraine could lead to widespread war in Europe. That's according to Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. That as Boris Johnson calls Moscow's shelling of a nuclear power station in Ukraine a direct threat to the safety of all of Europe. The Zaporizhzhia power plant caught fire overnight and has been seized by Russian forces. Speaking in Brussels in the last hour, Stoltenberg said NATO isn't seeking a war with Russia.
With the cities under siege, schools, hospitals and residential buildings shelled, reckless actions around a nuclear power plant last night, and many civilians killed or wounded. The days to come are likely to be worse.
Home Secretary Priti Patel says Ukrainians fleeing into Poland were escaping the most atrocious set of circumstances. She was speaking from the Polish border, where she's meeting Ukrainians seeking to flee to the UK. She's there to launch the Ukrainian Family Scheme, which allows anyone settled in the UK to bring their Ukrainian family to safety. Australian cricket legend Shane Warne has died aged 52. His management said in a statement that he died of a suspected heart attack at his villa in Thailand. The news is the second devastating blow for Australian cricket within 24 hours, with fellow great Rod Marsh also dying today, having suffered a major heart attack last week. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now let's get straight back to Nana.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So welcome on board. You're with me, Nana Akua, on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's back to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, see, I can't believe I'm asking it, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? There's been a new £253 million so-called smart prison. It's opened, it's focusing on rehabilitation and maintaining family links for inmates as opposed to punishment. The Category C prison has tablets for education and learning in cells and was described by one inmate as beautiful. So I'm asking, is our prison service becoming a soft touch? And on those who've broken, in particular, the law. So let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Claire, do you think that this is truly the right way forward?
I think it is. We can all see that the prison service hasn't perhaps worked in the past. There have been numerous reforms, numerous documents coming out to look at how best we go forward. And the theme through all of them is rehabilitation is the answer. But we don't do it properly. We shove these people into prisons and we hope that they might not get themselves into trouble again. Inevitably, they do. They come across some worse criminals in there. They learn extra things. They come out and they reoffend. And if you're not going to break that cycle, it's only going to get worse. So education is really, really important. And as we heard from your guest, Adz, he now runs his own gym, so he's got a business. He's into health and fitness, which has got to be good for mental health. And if he's going out there and talking to people in prison and those into the sort of judicial system at a young age, if he makes a difference early, then we may see that being broken and those young people are not going to end up in prison later on. So no, I don't think it's a soft touch. I think we need to look at it. The names of things, calling something not a cell but a room. Well, you know,
it's a cell. You should be in a cell.
It is, and it doesn't matter if you call it a cell or a room. At the end of the day, that door will be locked, and it's a hefty door, so you're not getting out. So it doesn't matter what you call it, but maybe giving them some links in with their families, so their family are not feeling isolated themselves from it. Because I think that that's also very important. The effect on family members of the person who is the criminal. We shouldn't underestimate that.
I see that, but, you know, I just think of the people who've actually been affected by the crime, and to me, their needs supersedes all of this. But I get it. I mean, I just find this all a bit, you know, it's a bit insipid, you know. Well, we can't call the cell a room, or we can't call the room a cell. We have to call it a room. We're not going to put bars on the windows. Look, put bars on the windows. Let people know that you're incarcerated in prison.
But I think the hefty door with the big lock is still going to do the same.
Yeah, but I think this psychological wish to make these people feel more comfortable so that they'll be... It's not going to work. What they need to do is just rehabilitate. But actually, he was in prison for being associated with the crime, so he didn't actually participate in it, but he was in the same room as the crime.
Two thoughts. First of all, we're talking about Class C prisons. And Class C has got a specific definition, not safe enough to be in an open prison, Class D, but not dangerous enough to be likely to try to escape. Let's get down to brass tacks here. Some of my friends are murderers. When I was Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, I dealt with people who had killed people in Northern Ireland. No two ways about it, they would accept that they were murderers. And David Trimble, who is a great politician, said, just because you've got a past doesn't mean you can't have a future. So when you look at Northern Ireland, which has been run by people and politicians who've actually killed other people, if they can turn it around, so can other people. What we have, though, is a desire for vengeance, a kind of an Old Testament eye for an eye thing. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but somebody I know had their father shot dead on their front door. And maybe I met the person who did it. What am I going to do, walk around with that hate for the rest of my life? The only question is what's best for society. And I would love to think that rehabilitation works. And it won't work with psychotic people, with people who enjoy pain.
No.
Those people won't be redeemed. But there are other people who have made mistakes. You saw Adz there. I don't know if he's the exception or the rule, but he's a real person who's turned his life around.
But he also, I mean, like, I'm not saying that he's not guilty or culpable for somebody dying and being murdered, but he was in the same space or the same room as this. They've actually banned that law now, so it doesn't work like that anymore. So that you know, is guilty by association in a sense. But and you know, obviously, I don't know the full details, so I'm not going to comment on that. But ultimately, I think people should be made to feel bad in prison. I mean, I will rehabilitate them, but as one of our people who sent in their thoughts were, that they should do things in society that would be helpful.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely,
what I'd like
and I think that's really important. So I think you can look at it alongside education is perhaps this, what we would consider community payback. So yeah, go and tidy up grass verges along roadsides, go help out at community halls.
Clean the sewers.
Absolutely, why not? Why not? There is no job that they shouldn't be able to do to give back to the communities. But, you know, I just think we always look at it from saying we need to lock them up, it needs to be really painful for them. Yes, it does, OK? There needs to be the punishment aspect, which is the door locking and you not being able to go out when you wish.
Well, Alan says, yes, it does. I actually was working, when I was an MP, with Royal Shrewsbury Prison, and HMP Prison, Shrewsbury, I can't remember the exact name of it now. And we were putting together a programme where the inmates could be involved in redigging a canal, because it's heavy manual labour, but it's quite technically demanding.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a good thing, because it was adding something back. I personally think, Nana, and maybe you would agree with this, that if you are in prison, you should be making enough money to pay for your prison place.
That's right.
In other words, put it back in. Just don't sit there for 12 years and count the days down.
That's right. That's what I think. They should put something back into the society, and they should be made to work and earn their crust to be there. Not
but also education.
And educated as well.
Missed out.
Absolutely.
But you can do all of those things.
I'm not
saying
but I'm not going to treat them like, I'm not going to handle them with kid gloves. I'm going to make them feel bad to know that they've probably caused a lot of pain to somebody else for that person's rest of their lives.
A lot of the time they actually recognise that.
Some of them don't, though, and
well,
you know that's.
And some people are irredeemable, but you can actually do paying back to society and rehabilitation at the same time, and that would be the best thing.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I want prisons to be livable in, but not too livable, not too nice. I mean, there's no problem. I have no problem telling someone to go back to their cell. In fact, I think I'd make quite a good prison warden. But this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics that we are discussing. Jonathan Jones is the Managing Director of Dragon, I think I've got it now, Tea in Cornwall.
Well done, Nana.
Thank you, Jonathan. So, what do you think, then? What are your thoughts on this?
It's a really difficult subject, I think, Nana. I agree with your guests, actually. I'm not going to pass judgment. I think any prison is a horrible, life-changing experience. And I agree with you, though. I think the families, the victims, their voice should always be heard. But I think we should look to private sector, look to industry, and look at some of the great brands that have helped rehabilitate prisoners. I think that's what I always think about when I think of someone having a custodial sentence, is what's next and how can we, outside, if you like, help those people reintegrate. Think of those poor children and think of the labour shortages we've all got in our businesses. Surely we can take an example from some of the great brands out there, like Timpsons on the high street, for example. They've built a business on helping rehabilitate. So my feeling is all about that. How can we help these boys and girls, men and women, actually reintegrate into business, into society? And that's where I think this prison actually might be a good thing. If it's got technology, bring it on.
OK. Well, listen, Jonathan, thank you for that. That's Jonathan Jones. He's there in Cornwall. Thank you for your thoughts. Yeah, he's always got a nice cup of tea because he's got a tea company, which is always good, but I love tea.
Love the branding.
It's very... he's sort of saying, bring it on, they should be doing things. I personally think they should be integrating back into work, and so that they are paying for their upkeep and making up their money. And actually, when they go to work, there should be a bit deducted to pay for the time that they've spent in prison.
You actually have to pay to go to university, and then you've got this massive loan for a while back. And I wouldn't be against having a kind of additional tax for people who've cost £35,000 a year to be in prison.
Yeah.
But if you actually do what I suspect there's I've just thought about that now, so I think it's a pretty good idea.
Well, with that one, I'm happy for them to call their cells
Dominic Raab
rooms.
is listening to you.
Well, I hope so.
Well,
he's your friend, you know, you should mention it. If you do rehabilitation, paying back to society and perhaps some sort of a tax, That might be a little bit more of a motivation than simply sitting in prison for, let's say, typically 3 or 4 years, then coming out and having been in a school for crime so you can do your crimes better.
I think, yes, you should be forced to earn or pay back the money that we've paid for you to be in jail or in your room. I'm happy to call it that if you're paying me back.
Yeah, and I don't see a problem with that. And I think that that's actually valuable. It's a valuable lesson that, you know, nothing in life is for free. So to repay your debt to society by taking on punishment and then physically repaying your debt to society by having deductions made is not a bad way of looking at it. But I do think you need to get the education to these people. They may well have not had the greatest start in life. They may have missed out school. They may have flunked out for whatever reason. So actually put that education back and prove to them that, you know what, you can do something useful in life and you need to. And as your Great British Voice just said, Timpson's is a great model for that.
Yeah.
It trains people up. It gives them their own premises to look after. It is their responsibility. That they've never had that before. They've never had anybody trusting them before.
Well, some of them have.
Asking.
I mean, you're talking about them as a bleeding heart.
Not all of them, Nana. You're right.
Some of them have, though. In fact, a lot of them probably have.
But when you meet them, they've actually learned how to speak to people. They have been in groups of people that they've just, you know, they've done whatever they've done on the streets. They have done whatever they've done in business. Fraudulently, some of them, but not all of them. And I think to give them that chance to show that they can actually do something in life has got to be a good thing. And I know you disagree with me, but I do think it's
not. I don't disagree with you. My heart bleeds for them. Really, seriously. I believe in rehabilitation. But I don't think it is as easy as that. Listen, sorry. I believe in rehabilitation. I actually do, and I think people should be treated with respect. But I love your idea that when they come out of prison, they should then start paying back, and that's financially, so they understand that everything has a cost. Whether you came up and you didn't have a wonderful upbringing or whichever way, at least you'll understand the value of the effort and energy people are putting in to pay for you. Right, so today I'm asking, is the UK's prison service a soft touch? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Tabitha says, we're way too easy on crime in this country. Let's take things back to how they were in the 60s. Hear, hear. Will says, this is 100% a good thing. It's about time we actually started trying to reform people who've broken the law and get them back in the community. Stuart says, we're encouraging people to commit crime, then they can visit the holiday camp. Whatever happened to punishment? Yvonne says this could actually save us money in the long run, as people will be less likely to reoffend and go back into prison. The system isn't working, so we might as well try something new. Well, that is a good point to end this particular debate on. That's a good point. But also, I quite like the new thing that Lembit mentioned, where they actually pay the money back. Now, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, the government is looking to impose strict rules on practitioners who administer Botox. And at the moment, you don't need a licence to offer Botox-style injections or dermal fillers. But MPs want that to change. So I'll be asking, are our Botox regulations tough enough? But first, it's the weather.
Hello again. A sunny day for some today, a fairly dismal day for others. And tomorrow will bring more of the same, some strong contrasts through the weekend. Some sunshine around, but still a fairly cold feel. This is the setup. This angry-looking low is heading to the south. This ridge of high pressure is toppling in, but this weather front has been with us for a number of days and is still affecting eastern England, and it will linger here into the weekend. Edging away from the far northeast of England and eastern Scotland, so things turning a little drier here, but for Lincolnshire down to East Anglia and the southeast, we'll keep the cloud, rain and drizzle through the night. So that'll help to keep the temperatures up, whereas further west it will turn frosty under clear skies. Temperatures even in towns and cities certainly close to freezing, rural areas well below. But plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, Wales, southwest England during Saturday. Of course, the East Midlands, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the southeast, we are looking at a dull day, and in places quite a damp day as well. Rain and drizzle tending to come and go, certainly across East Anglia and the southeast, and that will suppress the temperatures. 5 or 6, Hull, Norwich might squeak up to 7. Further west, though, with a bit of sunshine, 8, 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius. But quite quickly, again, with those clear skies in the west, temperatures will drop sharply as we head through Saturday night. The cloud and rain will finally start to fizzle out, or certainly pull away from East Anglia in the southeast. We're just left with a few showers on Sunday, maybe over the Midlands. South Wales, South West England, but even here, I think they'll tend to ease off. So for most, Sunday is also dry, and certainly across much of the north and the west. We'll see, again, plenty of blue sky on Sunday. But again, temperatures are not really going to get too high. We start frosty, we end up about 7, 8, 9 Celsius, and add on this wind across the south on Sunday, and it really will feel pretty chilly. Bye for now.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's coming up to 55 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, new government plans could see a crackdown on who can administer certain beauty treatments to protect patients from damaging injections. Figures from April last year suggested around about 6 million people in the UK are considering cosmetic treatments, but beauty practitioners offering Botox-style injections or dermal fillers don't need a licence, and there's currently very few restrictions. But an amendment to the Health and Care Bill due to be tabled on Tuesday would see the government have the power to introduce a licensing regime to anyone offering treatments. So I'm joined in the studio now by Dr. Shirin Lakhani, who owns Elite Aesthetics. Shirin, thank you very much for joining me. Now, how necessary is this particular legislation?
Well, Nana, the situation in the UK currently has been likened to the Wild West. There are no regulations in place determining who can deliver cosmetic injections, and there are no laws to govern it. So this is well overdue at the moment to try and bring some safety to patients.
Do you think it might give people a false sense of security, though? You might think, oh, it's all right, that person's got a licence, I'll go to them, then they'll Botox botch your face.
Absolutely. I think that there needs to be a lot more clarification on what this licence is going to involve. And certainly when I heard the news, I had mixed feelings about it, because I feel that while regulation is long overdue, this seems to be a soft touch approach. I think there needs to be more laws on who can provide the treatments. I really do think the government need to stipulate that it should be medical personnel only. but they don't seem to have the appetite to do that.
So what's your background then? Because are you an ex-doctor, or are you a practitioner specifically in Botox? Or
So I started life in the NHS as a doctor. I graduated in '99 and worked in the NHS for around 20 years. Alongside that, I trained in injectable treatments, and the training never stops. It's a medical treatment, and I think at the moment we're the only country in the world where this situation exists, that non-medics can literally pick up a needle and inject someone's face without any qualifications, without any insurance, and without any recrimination.
My God, if anyone tried to do that to me, heaven help them. Have you ever had any Botox done yourself?
Yes.
Really? Never?
Yes.
Where?
Well, I have had treatments. I'm in my late 40s.
On your own?
I've got very good colleagues that I work with that I trust with my face. And all the people who do injectables in my clinic are all doctors.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should go. I mean, we've all seen the horror stories with the complications that can happen. These aren't like having your nails done or having your hair done. There are serious consequences that can occur.
Like what?
Like in extreme cases, you can cause blindness with dermal fillers.
Really?
Yes. So
how would that occur? You're not doing someone's eyes, you're doing around.
No, so it can occur from any injection in the face. People tend to worry about the ones that are around the eyes, but actually injecting someone's lips, which is such a common treatment now, undertaken by young girls, could actually lead to permanent blindness.
Really? What is it, the Botox going into the...
Well, it's dermal fillers that cause blindness rather than Botox, but it's injecting into...
the stuff that's going in.
So the filler gets injected into an artery and basically blocks off that artery, so it starves the tissue supplied by that artery of oxygen and causes death of that tissue.
Oh, wow. So if you get an artery that's going to your eyes,
yes,
you could cause blindness. And is it reversible at all?
Generally, with blindness, it's not reversible. I mean, there are other areas where you get death of the tissue, which, if caught early enough, and that's the key, could be reversible.
So what are the biggest injuries that you see with the Botox treatment? Because I presume some people must come to you to sort of correct something that's gone wrong.
Yeah, so, I mean, most of it is to do with dermal fillers.
Around the mouth? Or?
It could be around the mouth, around the eyes. The number of people coming through the doors now for correctional wear is rising exponentially, and that's to do with the huge growth in the sector of non-qualified practitioners undertaking treatments. Now, don't get me wrong, complications can happen with everyone. Even in the most experienced hands, there is a risk of a complication. But the difference is, as doctors, we're trained to deal with them. We have access to the drugs that we need to dissolve fillers. And your general lay public member who's just decided to do a YouTube course or whatever and picked up a needle doesn't have access to that. A lot of the time they're incapable of recognising the complication itself.
Right.
So people get told, oh, don't worry, it's just bruising, when it's actually early tissue death.
Well, that sounds horrible, but the law should be a good thing, right? Ultimately, it's a good thing.
Ultimately, any regulation in this industry is well overdue, but the fear is that this isn't going to go far enough to protect the public.
Well, let's hope they police it properly as well, that you can't just grab a licence. Dr. Shirin Lakhani, thank you so much for joining me. Really good to talk to you. She's an aesthetic doctor at Elite Aesthetics. Right, you're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. There's more to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Now, for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. NATO entering and fighting in Ukraine could lead to widespread war in Europe. That's according to Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. The UN Human Rights Office says 331 civilians have been killed and 675 have been injured in the Ukraine conflict. Boris Johnson has called Moscow's shelling of a nuclear power station in Ukraine a direct threat to the safety of all Europe. The Zaporizhzhia power plant, the largest in Europe, caught fire overnight and has been seized by Russian forces. Speaking in Brussels earlier, Stoltenberg said NATO isn't seeking a war with Russia.
With the cities under siege, schools, hospitals and residential buildings shelled, reckless actions around a nuclear power plant last night, and many civilians killed or wounded. The days to come are likely to be worse.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the Russian people to take action against their government.
Russian people, I want to appeal to you. How is this possible? After all, we fought together in 1986 against the consequences of the Chernobyl catastrophe. How could you ever forget about it? If you did not forget, then you must not keep silent. You must tell your authorities. Go out on the streets and say that you want to live on the land without radioactive contamination. Radiation does not know where Russia is.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba claims there have been civilian atrocities, but says they have to trust in international law.
When bombs fall on your cities, when soldiers rape women in the occupied cities, and we have numerous cases, it's difficult, of course, to speak about the efficiency of the international law. But this is the only tool of civilization that is available to us to make sure that in the end, eventually, all those who made this war possible will be brought to justice.
The Metropolitan Police is gathering evidence in relation to alleged war crimes in Ukraine. It's in support of the International Criminal Court investigation. Detectives in the Met's War Crimes team are appealing for anyone in the UK who may have direct evidence of crimes in Ukraine from November 2013 to present. Well, speaking in Denmark earlier, UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says Russia is playing with fire.
Russian armed forces has in its arsenal a whole range of horrors that go way beyond capabilities that we would choose to have if you're complying with Geneva Conventions, the thermobaric vacuum bombs, for example, that we see in their inventory, in the way they are used, the cluster munitions that many of our countries have banned, those are weapons they still use. And the worrying signs from President Putin is, in his words, he seems to indicate no limit.
Well, speaking from the Polish border, Home Secretary Priti Patel says it was heartbreaking to have met Ukrainians forced from their homeland because of the Russian invasion. She's there to launch the Ukraine Family Scheme, which allows anyone settled in the UK to bring their Ukrainian family to safety. The UN Refugee Agency says 1 million people have fled Ukraine in the last 7 days. Protesters have gathered outside NATO's headquarters in Brussels, calling for a no-fly zone to be enforced over Ukraine. NATO act now! NATO act now! Carrying placards reading NATO close the sky and NATO act now, the mostly Ukrainian demonstrators said their country's military cannot fend off the Russian invasion without more help from the West. Well, to other news now, and Australian cricket great Shane Warne has died aged 52, regarded as one of the finest bowlers of all time. His management have said in a statement that he died of a suspected heart attack at his villa in Thailand. The news is the second devastating blow for Australian cricket within 24 hours, with fellow great Rod Marsh also dying today, having suffered a heart attack last week. Former England and Yorkshire cricketer Sir Geoffrey Boycott told GB News Warne transformed cricket and says he's one of the greatest bowlers of all time.
If you had to pick players who've transcended above greatness, I would say people like Bradman, Gary Sobers and him. He had a fierce determination to win. He had great skill, great personality with it. And my best compliment I could pay him was say, I wish I'd have been able to bat against you. He said, really, Geoffrey? I said, yeah, not because I think I would have played easily, because I never faced anybody as great as you.
Sir Geoffrey Boycott speaking to us earlier there. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, it's back to Nana.
It's 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and also former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik. So still to come, each Friday at 5, we'll put the spotlight on a particular guest or a subject matter in my feature Friday Focus. And in a few moments, I'll ask, what role does China have when it comes to the invasion of Ukraine? So far, China has called on both Russia and Ukraine to find a solution through negotiations and reiterated its support for Russia's position. So could they hold the key to peace talks between the two countries? If China isn't the solution, maybe it's business. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? Major companies are pulling their services and halting product sales in Russia as they condemn Putin's actions. Apple, Google, IKEA and Netflix are just some of the big brands pulling out of the country. So will big business force Putin to end this war? And as the invasion continues, over 1 million people have fled Ukraine to find safety. I'll speak to one of those families after 5:30. Have your say, as ever, on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces has taken another concerning turn. Buildings at Europe's largest nuclear power station in Ukraine have been damaged after it was hit by shellings. Now, world leaders are now accusing Russia of acting recklessly. Boris Johnson says it could directly threaten the safety of all of Europe. But for my Friday Focus today, I want to look at possible solutions to this crisis, specifically by looking at the response of one of Russia's longtime allies, China. This week, China's foreign minister spoke with the Ukrainian foreign minister, describing the situation in Ukraine as a conflict, the strongest remarks they have made to date. But the country remains fairly tight-lipped on the invasion by Russia. So I want to ask, could China push Putin to peace talks with Ukraine? Excuse me. I'm joined now by Austin Williams, who's a writer and author of China's Urban Revolution. Austin, thank you for joining me. Whilst Western countries have imposed sanctions on Russia, China said on Wednesday that it would not follow suit. Are leaders there staying totally loyal to Putin and Russia?
I don't think it's as necessarily as simplistic as that. I mean, no offense to your question, but I just think that China has 6,000 nationals in Ukraine. And I think they were as surprised as anybody that this attack took place. At the moment, there's 1,500 evacuated. There's been 1 dead reported and many, many more injured. So I don't think that China is necessarily complicit, as some of the stories have said, in this attack, and they were taken by surprise. Even though they signed a joint communique, which again has been widely reported in the press a couple of weeks ago after the Winter Olympics, to say that they would kind of work together and almost kind of form a bloc, especially in terms of finance, against the West. So I think that China has got its own problems in this scenario, because China has historically had this maxim of a non-intervention in the internal and domestic politics of foreign countries. Whatever you might think of whether they've ever lived up to that, that's the way they think about it. So at the moment, they are damned if they do, damned if they don't, and actually their entire history of the last 40 years has been sitting on the fence. At some point, they may have to come off, but we can talk about it.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, are they not worried about secondary sanctions? So as they sit next to Russia, the world will start closing off to them as well.
Well, that's very true. I mean, at the moment, there's an element of China may gain, because as Nord Stream 2 is shut down to Germany and into European countries, so they've just opened up the Power of Siberia, which is the name they've given to the oil and gas pipeline towards north of China. So in some ways, they're going to gain some of that oil and some of that trade that the West is actually curtailing. And they've already kind of done a number of financial deals. Huawei is actually making inroads into Russia. So, there's that kind of short-term gain. However, you're right that if what's actually happening, which is what China in some ways is really nervous about, is that this has unified the West. China would be very happy in some regards, in some spheres, if this was just seen to be America, or this was against that old kind of narrative of China versus the American elite or Britain. What's actually happened is there's been a unification with the West, polarized in favor of Ukraine against Russia, and China doesn't want to be seen to be dragged into that relationship. So that's why I'm sure in some regards it kind of endorses what Russia's done in some respects, and I'm sure it can think it can benefit from it. But also it realizes two things. One is that being a pariah in a global financial market is not good for its status. And secondly, some of these kind of rebellions and protests against national governments is going to impact upon the ability of Chinese nationals or Uyghurs or Kazakhs or Mongols or, you name it, lots of minority groups who may also feel maybe they have a right to kick off and start up. And that terrifies China, because China is premised on internal stability. That's its entire raison d'etre.
Because I'm wondering about China's nuclear arsenal. I mean, they've been very tight-lipped. They never say what they've got. But could it be that they have more nuclear weapons than Russia?
Well, I'm afraid your guess is kind of as good as mine. I mean, I always premise anything you say about Chinese facts with the fact that they may actually be slightly different to the official line, because you can't really tell what's actually going on within China. But obviously, China has other ambitions. Yes, so China wants to be kind of a global leader. It wants to be involved in the Western network. It wants to influence policy. It wants Taiwan back. So there's a number of potential conflicts which are on the horizon. But at the moment, China wasn't in a position, or certainly wasn't posing itself yet as willing to step onto that world stage and take that chance. It was biding its time. This has kind of thrown it into that turmoil as to whether it now has to take advantage of some aspects. And there's lots of very hardline nationalists within China who are advocating maybe for an attack on Taiwan. But I think the Chinese establishment, the party itself, is actually kind of playing a very cautious game. Is going to really kind of rein it in. But it's one of those conflicts which, in some ways, many of us never expected, and it's as vague and as confusing to look at what China's reaction will be tomorrow as it was 2 weeks ago, thinking that Russia would never invade Ukraine. So I think it's still all up in the air.
And very briefly, do you think that China somewhere holds the key to peace between Russia and Ukraine?
I think that it would like to. On the other side, it doesn't want to yet be in that position. So, it could side with Russia, it could side with the West, it could act as a neutral arbiter, peacekeeper. The problem is that all of those options destabilize its current trajectory, which is just purely trying to become a developed country, because it's still an undeveloped country in large parts of China. And so this kind of external impetus demanding that China act on the world stage is not what was in its plan. And so it's certainly not going to volunteer itself as yet to be peacemaker. And you can see what happened even with COP26, when, China was at the forefront, almost in the leadership of solar panels and wind turbines and all those kind of environmental things. But when the world leaders came together and actually started to argue that China was still developing too much and still polluting too much, the force of that moral narrative made China get back in its box. So China is not yet able to exercise its authority.
Yeah, they were nowhere to be seen, were they? Austin, thank you very much for your thoughts. That's Austin Williams. He's an academic and author of China's Urban Revolution. Right, I'm also joined by Alan Mendoza, the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society and Transatlantic Foreign Policy and National Security think tank. Alan, thank you for eventually joining us. I'm joking. So we're really looking at China now, because if sort of as an observer of it, it looks to me that like they may hold the key, because their association with Russia is such that if Russia starts to be a pain in the backside for them, they may start to take a different view and not be so, in a sense, collaborative with Russia.
Yeah, I think that's certainly correct to assume that the Chinese and the Russians have a relationship. That's clear, that's obvious. They were talking before this, they will continue to talk during, and no doubt after. But you're right, there's a point at which the Chinese may decide it's more trouble than it's worth to be propping up Putin on his adventure. But I think that's not right now. Right now, they're actually very interested in seeing how this plays out, because if you like, it's game theory for their own moves in the future. And they look at this basically and go, right, Russia Russia does this, here's a West response. Russia does that, that's a West response. So where do we, if we're doing the same thing, where would we do it differently, where would we not? And I think when you've got, if you like, a sandbox like that, the Russians being the puppeteer, it means that you can just let them play for a bit until you call a halt.
And do you suspect that if we in the West decide, OK, do you know what, we're going to stop buying stuff and we're going to start sanctioning China now, that they could then have a big rethink and start to draw away from Russia?
Yes, I mean, I think that would not be in Beijing's calculations right now as being something worthwhile. Again, the question would have to be at what stage of any conflict it would be that this would happen, how, you know, who's winning, who's losing at that point, and crucially, of course, what the Chinese see, you know, as commercial gains as well in this. I mean, don't forget that the Russians are going to have to rely pretty heavily on the Chinese economically, and that's quite a big market.
But also, if we all decide to stop buying Russian gas, which we could do, if we really worked hard at it, it wouldn't be actually that difficult to find other sources of gas. Would China not then think, well, we'll buy it all off Russia?
Oh, absolutely. Here's the irony of what the Russians have done. They've allowed themselves to, you know, Putin's going on about, oh, NATO's encroaching on me, etc. The West is encroaching on me. By this move, he is allowing China to encroach on Russia's power, on Russia's resources, ultimately perhaps even on Russia's territory, because he has no choice but to deal with Russia as China as the only viable alternative power who can bail him out. So he's leaving himself essentially at their mercy, which is a strange move for a so-called strong man to be doing.
Well, he might not see it like that. He thinks that he's strangling the West, but I suppose in doing that, he's slightly taking his eye off the ball as to what the isolating position he's put himself in. I think he didn't calculate this would be the result so quickly in the process, and that's probably true. Do you think he wasn't thinking, because Russia is almost an island in a sense that he has backed up all the reserves, the currencies, he's stopped buying foreign currencies, he's got lots of gold, so he doesn't need to rely on any of the West, and he's also got a huge reserve of cash, and he's got the pipeline, so Nord Stream 1, which I think that's the one that runs through Ukraine. He's got another one running through Belarus, and I can understand why tactically he wants those alliances and those countries. So where do they go next? And what's, in your eyes, where do you see this going?
What, the conflict itself? Look, it depends on, you know, how quickly he achieves whatever objectives he's set himself in Ukraine. Were he to take the country, as the French believe that's his objective now, it seems, given his rambling speech yesterday, that might be his objective, then, you know, what do you do after that? The country's going to be, you know, in turmoil. He'll have to pacify it. This is going to be bloody. At the same time, does this create, and does he have the troops to actually do it, is a big question. But let's assume he manages all that. Does he stop there, or does he take Moldova as an obvious next target? People haven't really spoken about this, but there's a long-standing Russian dispute in Transnistria. There's a potential to go, no, they're not a NATO member, not an EU member. It's tried to apply for the EU membership, of course. So you know, at this point, you look at this and go, well, he's likely to continue, isn't he, rather than stop, because at that point we'll have done X, Y, and Z sanctions to the extent we can do. So where does he go next? He goes, I've been sanctioned there. Unless they're going to militarily come against me, why don't I push on and see my next step? And I don't see ever in history a dictator going, fine, I've achieved this, I'm stopping there.
And I can imagine China will look onto that and say, well, look, if you affect our ability to make money, then we may act.
Well, they may act to Putin and say, yes, absolutely, you have now become an encumbrance round our neck. You've exhausted the possibilities of learning from this process that I was talking about in terms of what may happen to us. Now, it's only downside from here on. At that point, the Chinese may decide to play games the other way and try and restore their good graces. But let's not forget that Beijing has its own objectives here, and one of them is certainly not to look after the people of Ukraine.
Interesting stuff. Alan Mendoza, thank you very much for joining me. Very interesting stuff. He's the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Right, so it's just an interesting moment, isn't it? In history, we've had COVID, now we've got this awful war. We've got loads to discuss. Stay with me, because on the way, the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end this war with Ukraine? Google, Nike and Apple are just some of the major firms to halt all product sales in Russia in a widening corporate backlash to the country's invasion of Ukraine. So will big business hold the key? First, let's get some more weather.
Hello again. A sunny day for some today, a fairly dismal day for others. And tomorrow will bring more of the same, some strong contrasts through the weekend. Some sunshine around, but still a fairly cold feel. This is the setup. This angry-looking low is heading to the south. This ridge of high pressure is toppling in, but this weather front has been with us for a number of days and is still affecting eastern England, and it will linger here into the weekend. Edging away from the far northeast of England and eastern Scotland, so things turning a little drier here, but for Lincolnshire down to East Anglia and the southeast, we'll keep the cloud, rain and drizzle through the night. So that'll help to keep the temperatures up, whereas further west it will turn frosty under clear skies. Temperatures even in towns and cities, certainly close to freezing, rural areas well below. But plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, Wales, southwest England during Saturday. Of course, the East Midlands, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the southeast, we are looking at a dull day, and in places quite a damp day as well. Rain and drizzle tending to come and go, certainly across East Anglia and the southeast, and that will suppress the temperatures. 5 or 6, Hull, Norwich might squeak up to 7. Further west, though, with a bit of sunshine, 8, 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius. But quite quickly, again, with those clear skies in the west, temperatures will drop sharply as we head through Saturday night. The cloud and rain will finally start to fizzle out, or certainly pull away from East Anglia in the southeast. We're just left with a few showers on Sunday, maybe over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but even here, I think they'll tend to ease off. So for most, Sunday is also dry, and certainly across much of the north and the west. We'll see, again, plenty of blue sky on Sunday. But again, temperatures are not really going to get too high. We start frosty, we end up about 7, 8, 9 Celsius, and add on this wind across the south on Sunday, and it really will feel pretty chilly. Bye for now.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's fast approaching 25 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? Google, Nike and Apple are just some of the major firms to halt all product sales in Russia in a widening corporate backlash to the country's invasion. This, added to international economic sanctions, has seen the ruble take a beating, losing around about 50% of its value at the start of the week. Now, the currency has continued to slump over the past several days, dropping an additional 8% on Wednesday. So for my Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? I'm joined by Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, Lee Jones, and also Senior Research Fellow at the Centre of Energy Policy and Tech at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimston. Right, so this is an interesting moment in history. It seriously is. And we're looking at a situation where we've got somebody who's almost on the loose, kind of creating havoc. And there's been a lot of different responses from all over the world. So I'm going to start with you. What do you think, then, in terms of big business and its impact on Putin at the moment?
Whenever we're looking at sanctions, we need to try to understand what is the possible link between inflicting economic pain on the target and getting the political gain that we want. So what is the mechanism that is going to link any particular withdrawal of economic engagement to the result that we want, i.e. Putin leaving Ukraine? So some of the things that we've seen, it's very implausible that there can be any link between those things. So if Nike pulls out of Russia, so what? That is not going to force Putin to pull out of Ukraine. Some of the more significant sanctions are the banking sanctions. They have had, as you have said, caused a collapse in the value of the ruble and led to a run on Russian banks. They will cause long-run inflation. They've forced up interest rates that will have a long-term depressive impact on the Russian economy. I don't think they're enough to collapse the Russian economy. And above all else, I think Putin prioritizes his political and security goals above economic goals. I think he's priced in the impact of sanctions into his plans. And at the moment, they don't seem to be deflecting him from his path. No, they don't appear to. Lee Jones.
I mean, it's been noticeable the way the Russian economy has been run over the course of the last few years. With the benefit of hindsight, it looks like he was moving up to this moment to give himself space. So he's been running at pretty much a budget surplus. He's been reducing the country's debt very significantly. And this puts it in a very strong position, coupled with the fact that an awful lot of countries, particularly in Europe, do depend to a considerable extent on Russian energy exports, particularly gas and oil. Russia is the biggest exporter of oil in the world, third biggest producer. And Europe gets 40% of its gas from Ukraine. So the sanctions have been carved around, leaving a corridor for energy to continue. And that means that, certainly as things are at the moment, he's both built up a war chest and he still has money coming in.
But do you think, Malcolm, that if we stop using as much as the Russian gas, that we can actually, if Europe decide, and they could do it quite swiftly, right? Surely they could, that they could cut off their dependence and reliance on Russian gas?
To an extent, and I think the European Union yesterday produced a plan that could reduce its dependence on Russian oil by a third over the course of the next year. But when you are 40% dependent on a single country for your imports, other countries around the world can gear up extra production. Right. We're already seeing that in the States and in the Middle East, but not overnight. This will take a matter of several months, if not years. What we saw after the great oil price shocks of the 1970s was that the world energy did actually undergo quite a significant revolution, to the extent that the oil price through the 80s came back pretty much to the price it had been before the great big oil shock. But that did take a decade, but it was extremely effective.
But what about LNG? Isn't that the liquefied natural gas that we could get from, say, Qatar and the United States? And I know that apparently Norway supply, they couldn't really give any more. But can't we look at other things and other places, like I think Turkey and other things, other
Yes, and that's what will happen. Now, clearly the UK is not the only country which is in this position, actually. We are relatively independent of Russian gas directly. Only about 5% of our gas imports are from Russia. And already about a seventh of our total gas use, so that's about a quarter of our imports, comes in on the basis of liquefied natural gas, largely, as you say, from Qatar. The States is the new kid on the block in terms of gas exports, liquefied natural gas exports. They undoubtedly have capacity to increase. But then we've got the issue of what about the size of the terminals? You do need specialist ports. We have a very large one in Milford Haven in Wales, but we would probably need to build 2 or 3 more. And there's also environmental questions about shipping gas around the world. They leak, these tankers, to an extent. Methane, natural gas, are much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So there are significant downsides to it. But I've no doubt that all of these things we will see happening over the course of the next few months and years.
Lee, do you think that we could potentially cut off our dependence quite quickly? Not the UK, but obviously the rest of the world could quickly cut off our dependence on Russian gas And if so, how long do you think it would take?
What Malcolm has just told you, I think, is right, which the answer is no. Certainly not in the short run, and even in the longer run, it's going to be difficult. I mean, once you start orienting your economies around a very large kind of monopoly supplier like Russia, it's very difficult to make those kinds of shifts. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, let's just buy it somewhere else. There are all kinds of infrastructure problems, supply bottlenecks, and so on, which we'd have to overcome.
So you think, because as Malcolm said, about a decade, but could we, is there no way we could do it faster than that?
I don't think so. I mean, Malcolm's more of an expert on this than I am. I'm not an expert.
Well, I want to get your view. I'm just getting your view.
My understanding is very difficult to do. So, and this is something else we need to understand about sanctions. I know you were talking earlier on to my colleague from the Henry Jackson Society, and you were discussing the possibility of sanctions on China as well. We've always got to appreciate that sanctions can run in both directions. Yeah. So in an interdependent world, it's not as simple as me just saying, well, I'm going to stop trading with you. Well, what happens to me as a result? Complex interdependence, it is complex. So we can't just slap sanctions on every possible intermediary that Russia will use to get around the banking sanctions. It will use Belarus, they'll use the Central Asian states, they will use China. If we start putting sanctions on those countries, it will impact our imports, and that will have an inflationary impact on our economies. So this is why all the Western governments have been trying to design sanctions in a way that will inflict suffering on Russia and the Russian people and try to exempt as much as possible the European economies. But we're already seeing it having a spillover effect on other countries. So the oil price has already increased as a result of the sanctions. And that's going to have a knock-on effect on every country that imports oil. So poor countries are going to have to pay a lot more for oil. The price of the dollar has gone up as a result. Now, poor countries borrow in dollars. So the cost of servicing their debts will also increase. The embargoing of Russia's central bank overseas assets, that could hit $300 billion in the global banking system, which could have an impact on our economies. We don't really know where these impacts stop. So when we hit them, we also risk hitting ourselves.
Well, I mean, I look at that and I hear that, but I'd rather not have people being able to bludgeon people to death in that manner. And to be honest with you, I'd rather take an economic hit, because I think that it's more frightening if we let this particular scenario continue and we continue with this interdependence. It's not working and something needs to change. Lee Jones, thank you very much for joining me, and also Malcolm Grimston. It's been a pleasure talking to you both. Thank you. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue our Great British debate, and I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former Liberal Democrat MP Len Vidopik and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. And as the invasion continues, over 1 million people have fled Ukraine to find safety. I'll speak to one of those families after 5:30. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:34. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has called Moscow's shelling of a nuclear power station in Ukraine a direct threat to the safety of all Europe. The Zaporizhzhia power plant, the largest in Europe, caught fire overnight and has been seized by Russian forces. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is warning the coming days in Ukraine are likely to be worse. The Metropolitan Police is gathering evidence in relation to alleged war crimes in Ukraine. It's in support of the International Criminal Court investigation. Detectives in the Met's War Crimes team are appealing for anyone in the UK who may have direct evidence of war crimes in Ukraine from November 2013 to present. Speaking from the Polish border, Home Secretary Priti Patel says it was heartbreaking to have met Ukrainians forced from their homeland because of the Russian invasion. She's there to launch the Ukraine Family Scheme, which allows anyone settled in the UK to bring their Ukrainian family to safety. The UN Refugee Agency says 1 million people have fled Ukraine in the last 7 days. Australian cricket great Shane Warne has died aged 52, regarded as one of the finest bowlers of all time. His management said in a statement that he died of a suspected heart attack at his villa in Thailand. The news is the second devastating blow for Australian cricket within 24 hours, with fellow great Rod Marsh also dying today, having suffered a heart attack last week. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. In a moment, it's back to Nana Akua.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion
and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
38 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, let's get back to the great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? Russia has seen some hugely influential businesses take a stand against their invasion. Google, Nike and Apple are just some of the major firms to hold all product sales there. I'm asking, will big business force Putin to end his war? What are your thoughts? Get in touch. I've still got my panel with me, former Liberal Democrat MP Len Bedopic and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Right, and as ever, this show is nothing without you, so please get your thoughts and views in at GB News or email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right. So, well, those two were doomsayers. I mean, I'm sorry about that, but I listened to what they had to say, and they basically said, oh, we're so interlinked globally that there's nothing that can be done. And I didn't like the sound of that, because I think there is always something.
But I think it's really obvious that you have to be careful. We always look for, we must do something, and then we fall for whatever that something may be, and we take that as the way forward, and it doesn't always work. So, yes, there was an awful lot of doomsaying, but I do think this is quite complicated. It isn't going to be solved easily, and I think it's actually in the hands of the Russian people. I think that they could be the ones to solve this, because the sanctions are hitting Russia as a whole. It is not saying, oh, well, Russian citizens, you're not part of the regime, so therefore we're not going to touch you. It's going to affect them. If you're taking away Google, Apple, Nike, IKEA, all of those businesses, that is affecting people's day-to-day lives. If they can't use their phones, they can't get a new phone, they can't go and purchase, a new wardrobe, for argument's sake. It looks quite funny on paper. However, these are people's lives that we're now affecting. They can't go and use Apple Pay, for example. They can't watch Netflix. All the very basics of their lives are being taken apart for something which isn't their fault. So that will, in turn, make those people angry. So you may then see an uprising, and I think that could be the way forward for stopping the war, is his own people rising up against Putin.
Interesting, because I sometimes think that we actually overcomplicate things, and that's where the problem lies. In actual fact, it's actually a lot more simple than that, and I do agree that the people will hold the key, but it's those businesses retracting their deals with Russia that may end up forcing the hand. But Lembit, I think you've got a different view.
No, not completely. I think that you're largely right. My big picture answer is, what could create an escalated war? What could create a nuclear war is politicians. What can stop the war is the public. because the public might even acquiesce to saying, OK, we'll let the Russians come in for a while and so on. And remember, we're talking about hundreds, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands dead, as happened in Iraq with what I believe to be the illegal invasion by UK and America. But then you've got to win the hearts and minds. And the reason we lost in Afghanistan is because the Taliban did that and the West did not. So big business is instrumental. Big business won't do it, but the public will say, just like you said, we can't get our flat packs.
But that is big business. That is business. That might be the public responding, but it's big business ultimately going in and refusing
but it is
to
they
trade
will
in
be
those
it's the catalyst for the individual.
Yeah, but there's a nuance here, because big business is losing business as well. Russia is a very important market, in my view. But what happens is the public will eventually say, and I include the billionaires as the public, saying, come on, Vladimir, you've got to stop this. This is ridiculous.
But it depends what they've been told, though, because even from you've even said that from all the areas that you've been to, certain areas that they don't see it the way we in the West see it.
It's not what they're being told, it's what they genuinely think. The Bulgarians, once again, to remind you, I was there last week, they're not being told rubbish, they just have a different interpretation.
Which is what?
The interpretation is that NATO has overstepped its mark, the West is overtly predatory, as is NATO, and Putin is not surprisingly responding, because Ukraine is so strategically important to Russia and has been for a century or 2 centuries even. So what could happen, and that's kind of the big picture debate, that's the political debate, that's what could lead to a nuclear war. But the public is saying, all right, we'll put up with this up to a point. And OK, big business might withdraw some of its services, or many of its services. I don't think Ivan in a tank in Kiev is going to surrender because he can't get his Netflix subscription renewed.
But it's not those people that you're talking about. It is the people sitting back in Russia getting on with their lives who are being affected. So you're not talking about those who are fighting, but the ones who are left in Moscow and over towards Siberia and all the rest of it.
And that's why I'm agreeing with you. That's why I'm agreeing with you. And dark thing for my background. The very first time I was on this show, I was talking about my history. And I mentioned that I lived under the shadow of the bomb. I was taught it was better to be dead than red because so much damage had been done to my family history. And now, and I was so depressed on Sunday, I lost Sunday because I thought, oh, well, we're heading towards a nuclear war. My view has changed only because of the consultations I had with people in Moscow, in Bulgaria and other places. And what you've said is basically right. My opinion now is that we have to recognise that the public will eventually say, come on, Vladimir, that's enough. However much you think he's a dictator, he isn't going to be able to resist a resistant public.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he's doing his best and he's not listening to anybody at all.
Yeah, but I don't think he can sustain that.
As ever, this shows nothing without you. Well, I hope he can't, and I don't believe he can either, but we'll see. It's nothing without you. So let's welcome one of our great British voices, and it's your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about what we're discussing. So Carol Wright is a health, grief and wellness coach from Northamptonshire. She joins us. Carol, what do you think? Do you think big business could be the catalyst to help to end this war?
No. I don't think it will be the catalyst to end the war. As your two speakers have just said, it's just taking away some business and things unless the people are uprising about the fact that they haven't got those products. And I don't think that Putin's going to listen. He's just going to do what he wants to do and get on with it.
Do you, in your mind, see anything that you think could help to end this war?
People need to start speaking up and start questioning the reasons behind everything.
Yeah, OK. Thank you very much, Carol. Really good to talk to you. That's Carol Wright in Northamptonshire. That's what Carol thinks people need to...
Carol's interesting there because I actually think that we imagine that Putin's just a dictatorship on his own. Every dictatorship is really a democracy because he's got people around him and they'll moan to him. If his generals start saying, now, come on, Vladimir, this isn't working well, even Vladimir Putin, who isn't, I literally say again, he's not insane, will feel the pressure. Now, that's a minority view, but I actually, here in this country, but eventually he has to listen. I don't think he wants to destroy his country.
He doesn't. Well, you say that, but he's going on with it. He's not listening to anybody at all. And I don't think he's mad in a sense, although anyone doing something like that is crazy, but I don't think so. Today, we're asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Eden says the so-called peace talks are a sham. Putin wants all of Ukraine. Nothing else will do. Catherine says we in the West think short-term. They don't have term limits for elections, or Putin is far more concerned about his legacy. I agree with that. Matthew says Putin grew up in and worked for a communist state. Do you really think he cares about what Apple, Google or Nike do? That's a very good point you make there as well. Well, I mean, it is horrible. It's horrendous. I hope that something can shift his mindset. But as the invasion of Ukraine continues, over 1 million people have fled the country, their home within the last 7 days. The UN Refugee Agency has warned we could see the largest refugee crisis this century, as they expect 4 million people to seek refuge away from Ukraine in the coming weeks and months. People have been heading west into neighbouring countries, including Poland, Romania, Moldova and Hungary. I'm joined by someone who's crossed the border who lives with his Ukraine.
Thank you. Hi. Me and my family are safe now. We are in Budapest, but we are worried about our friends who are today and who didn't left Ukraine. And we are here now. We were escaped 4 days on a border with Romania. We were there. We were by cars and we slept in car, and it was really horrible and dangerous because I was with my wife and with my little boy, and that there was very unbelievable situation, because really in this 21st century no one thought that these things can be done in Ukraine and also in other countries. And I don't know, we are now safe, but we are really worrying about our friends, and my wife's parents are still in Ukraine, and at this time we really don't know what to do. Just try to support Ukraine from here, support my friends how I can, and I will do my best to do something with my second homeland. And in this situation are now.
I mean, in a modern day, you wouldn't expect to see that, and I could imagine it must be an absolute shock for you to have to go through that. And now you're in Hungary. What's the welcome been like there?
I am in Hungary now, but we are planning to go to Spain. I have their friends, and they can help us. But we decided today we are already here about 3 days, and we don't know what to do, where to continue our life, and at this time we just decided to go Spain, and from there support our friends. I don't know, maybe we can do some we can send something, something from Spain, do what we can do, and I believe that we will live only with that things that to help people there, because they are in very big dangers now.
Alexandra, I wish you a very safe journey, and our heart goes out to all of you fleeing Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Alexandra Chichlavili. He's a refugee from Ukraine. If you just joined me, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. It's fast approaching 9 minutes to 6 o'clock, and it's time now for part of the show where we discuss stories from the day with my panel, and I'm joined by former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Right, so first up, a restaurant in Shanghai has been named the highest in a building in the world by the Guinness Book of World Records. Heavenly Jin restaurant is situated on the 120th floor of Shanghai Tower at an altitude of 1,825 feet. So what's the tallest building you've ever been in, Lembit?
The Khalifa Tower.
Really? Where's that?
It's it's in Dubai. It's, I think, the tallest building in the world. It was scary because I don't know if I imagined it or not, it moves.
Oh, well, it would do. They do that on purpose, don't they? So they don't snap.
So,
that's the idea.
But I didn't have dinner there. I don't think I could have.
You couldn't eat in it. What about you, Claire?
I'd been to the top of the World Trade Centre.
Yeah, me
to
too.
The restaurant, and that was the most stunning building, and it still hurts to this day that's gone. Absolutely beautiful. And I'm really proud that I've been there.
Yeah, I've been there as well. That would have been mine as well. And I can actually remember leaning, because there's a pillar in the centre, and the whole thing is glass. And we leant back, and I was literally hugging this pillar in the centre.
I still think the most romantic one is Empire State Building.
Have you ever been in it?
Yeah, I have, and it really is.
Oh, the top of the Empire State, yeah.
Beautiful.
Sleepless in Seattle.
I'd love to go there. OK, right, let's... next story. A motorist in Birmingham has been left shocked after finding a wheelie bin chained to the road to stop people parking in an on-street space. Suhad Mia was driving down a congested residential road looking for a space when he saw one being blocked by a bin. He went to move it and, to his disbelief, found that it was bolted to the ground. This has actually divided residents' opinions because they say it's selfish, but others think it's genius. So what do you think of that? Is that a step too far, Claire?
Yes, it is. You don't own that piece of road. Having said that, I deal with parking disputes all the time on a local council. It is one of the things that is guaranteed to irritate people is bad parking, inconsiderate parking, or just none available.
Yeah.
When I moved into my place in Lambeth in central London, I could park for free outside my house, but due to the wisdom of politicians, I ended up having to pay. And now I bring my old car into London, it's like 25 quid. No. I feel robbed and ripped off. Stand up for the driver. That's what I say.
You, Les, and everything else, haven't you? Well, and finally, moths are the next thing to be dragged into the woke culture war. Gypsy moths have been renamed the spongy moths for fear that the original name features a term considered to be a racist slur towards Romani people. So is this a sensible change, or is it a step too far?
It's rubbish. It's rubbish. Let's rename serpents in case they've got negative connotations with the devil from the Bible. Come on.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, this is a step too far, if that's the name of the moth. Has anybody asked the Roma community whether they're offended by it? Because I don't think they would be, to be honest. Yeah. It's a moth. Leave it alone.
It is absolutely ludicrous, isn't it, that we would actually need to change the name of something.
It's just butterfly thinking, isn't it?
Isn't it just? I mean, there's a gypsy moth, it's a pub, and then there's a boat, isn't it, in Greenwich, the gypsy moth, which is part of
It's been used throughout history, so I don't think it's a new thing.
Yeah. Honestly, woke has gone too far. Woke has gone broke. Well, on today's show, we've been asking, will big business force Putin to end his war with Ukraine? And according to our poll, 24% of you say yes, and 75% of you say no, it won't. Well, I suppose they've gone against me today, but that's it. But I hope it does. I hope the impact of business will actually do something and help to end this war. Listen, it's been a pleasure as ever. I'm going to say thank you so much to my panel. I have former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik, thank you so much, and also former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall for joining me today. And also a big thank you to you. I'm going to be back tomorrow, same time, same place. That's between 4 and 6 o'clock. We'll be talking about all the big stories of the day and getting your views, and keep all of your thoughts coming. You can find out more if you go to our YouTube channel and look at us at GB News, or don't forget to download the app where you can watch this and all other shows. Well, I'll be back tomorrow at 4. Have a fabulous day. I'll leave you with the weather forecast. Nigel Farage, or is it Dubes & Co. next?
Hello again. A sunny day for some today, a fairly dismal day for others. And tomorrow will bring more of the same, some strong contrasts through the weekend. Some sunshine around, but still a fairly cold feel. This is the setup. This angry-looking low is heading to the south. This ridge of high pressure is toppling in, but this weather front has been with us for a number of days and is still affecting eastern England, and it will linger here into the weekend. Edging away from the far northeast of England and eastern Scotland, so things turning a little drier here, but for Lincolnshire down to East Anglia and the southeast, we'll keep the cloud, rain and drizzle through the night. So that'll help to keep the temperatures up, whereas further west it will turn frosty under clear skies. Temperatures even in towns and cities certainly close to freezing, rural areas well below. But plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, Wales, southwest England during Saturday. Of course, the East Midlands, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the southeast, we are looking at a dull day, and in places quite a damp day as well. Rain and drizzle tending to come and go, certainly across East Anglia and the southeast, and that will suppress the temperatures. 5 or 6, Hull, Norwich might squeak up to 7. Further west, though, with a bit of sunshine, 8, 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius. But quite quickly, again, with those clear skies in the west, temperatures will drop sharply as we head through Saturday night. The cloud and rain will finally start to fizzle out, or certainly pull away from East Anglia in the southeast. We're just left with a few showers on Sunday, maybe over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but even here, I think they'll tend to ease off. So for most, Sunday is also dry, and certainly across much of the north and the west. We'll see, again, plenty of blue sky on Sunday. But again, temperatures are not really going to get too high. We start frosty, we end up about 7, 8, 9 Celsius, and add on this wind across the south on Sunday, and it really will feel pretty chilly. Bye for now.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.